We're in Munich today to try out one of the newest versions of BMW's most important cars. Now, it's not the 3 Series, but it is one model that contributes greatly to BMW sales worldwide and has sold over 3.5 million units since its inception in late 2003. Now, we are talking, of course, about the all-new BMW X3. But before we go out for a drive, we're gonna go for a quick history lesson with this one. This is the first generation model, and it was introduced in late 2003 for the 2004 model year. And at the time, there was only one X model from BMW, it was the X5, and with the introduction of the X3, it sort of broadened BMW's horizons, and since then, well, we have a whole lot more X models from BMW. Now, at the time when this was released, well, it didn't have the warmest of reception from some people. But BMW didn't give up on it, because if they did, they wouldn't have 3.5 million sold since then. Now, thankfully, BMW did improve it. Now, I don't know if there is a German equivalent of the word Kaizen, but this is exactly what they did for the second generation X3. It was a lot longer, a lot wider and taller than the first generation model, making it heaps more practical. And the best part is, it rides on the same platform as the E90, one of the best driving and riding 3 Series of all time. And in terms of design, it really grew up, it's a lot more mature, and this is perhaps my favorite generation. But that's not to say I don't like this third generation. In fact, I really did enjoy driving one of these. When I borrowed one of these, it was right in the middle of a baby fair, and I thought, okay, great, I have something that can carry all the baby gear I can get. And the X3 just does it all. And think of it this way, where we live, where it floods all the time, the 3 Series Touring isn't always the best solution, although I personally like the 3 Series Touring, but this is probably the perfect BMW wagon for our roads. It's the right size, it's the right shape and everything, and it doesn't matter if you get the diesel or the electric, you really can't go wrong with an X3. Which is why there is a lot riding on this 4th generation X3. Not only does it have to combine everything that makes a BMW, but it also has to be green, it also has to be electrified, and also still be practical, reliable, dependable, and everything you need from a daily driver. So again, this is one of the most important cars that BMW makes. And this one, well, this is gonna be BMW's moneymaker, and it has to be almost perfect. Now, if there's one thing I noticed about the X3, it's that BMW is more willing to take design risks compared to, say, the 3 Series. And as you can see here, it looks nothing like the previous generation and the ones before that. Now, here at the front, you get this slim headlight design and a very radical, revolutionary look here for the headlights. It still sort of has the Corona rings from days gone by, but it's been done in a way that these are L-shaped. And you also have this much bigger kidney grille going on, following the current design language of BMW. Now, over here on the sides, now this is the 30e, or the plug-in hybrid model. So that means you have this little flap here for your charging cable. Now, overall, it is longer, wider, and taller than before, but BMW has done it in a way that it's not too obvious, or it doesn't make it look too bulky. The window sizes are just the right shape, because if you make them too big, the car will look smaller. If you make them too slim, it'll look out of proportion. So pretty spot on the proportions here. Now, I am aware that the design is quite polarizing. Well, the rest of the BMW lineup has been for quite some time. But one thing you can't fault BMW for is, they're really trying to differentiate their cars. I mean, you're not gonna lose this in a car park and say, it's like, oh, it looks like this car or it looks like this car. It's like, no, like this is as distinct as they come. The overall shape, however, well, you can recognize it as an X3, but thanks to all the little design intricacies, you can just tell that this is a totally new model. Another thing worth noting, it's now got flush door handles. So they did this back in the 90s. So I had an E34 5 Series and an E39 5 Series back in the day, which sort of had these door handles. Then they went for the pull type, and then they went back for this. Now, they're not just doing this for aesthetic purposes. This is actually for aerodynamics, and this is the most efficient X3 to date. And I'm not just talking about the plug-in hybrid model. If you follow me all the way here to the back, it's got a totally new design language. Now, in a way, it still has the classic BMW L-shaped design, but it's done in a way that, it looks more radical. So the taillights are slimmer and they point towards here, right, to the good old roundel. Tailgate wide, and it's got a low opening sill, so that makes sliding items in and out a lot easier. Now, the trunk floor may be a bit on the high side, but it's still an improvement from the previous generation X3. You have a flatter, wider, and longer cargo area. And as a parent, this is great news because you can easily fit in your baby strollers and whatever baby paraphernalia I might have to carry when going on a road trip or just going to the mall. This section is also a little bit more upright, so that gives more vertical space for up and down, and contributing to a larger cargo area. So what do we think about the design overall? As I mentioned, it is going to be polarizing, but let's take a look at the other competitors for a while, yeah? You look at the Mercedes GLC, for instance, and yes, it is instantly recognizable as a Mercedes. Although, if you look at other Mercedes models, they all kind of look too similar. Now, its biggest rival at the moment is the recently released Audi Q5. Now, Audi is very evolutionary in terms of its design language, and yes, it is less polarizing, but for those who want to stand out a little bit more, well, the X3 is the crossover for you. Now, stepping inside, it is just as huge of a change from the previous model. Now, the previous generation X3 had a sort of wide and expansive feel in the dashboard particularly. And now this is, it's more wraparound, it's more cocooned inside. But that's not to say that it feels tighter. Yes, it has that cocoon design, but at the same time, they made the shoulder room much wider than before. You have more hip room as well, and you have more room around your waist too. The design language, of course, follows that of the current crop of all-new BMW. So you have a widescreen here in front that houses both the instrument cluster and the iDrive system. Now, iDrive, of course, as simple and as easy to use, and it has been for the last 15 or so years. And what BMW has done here in the center is they got rid of the traditional aircon sliders. So this controls the how much the aircon vents open, and then this is for direction. The cubbyhole situation in here is much improved compared to the previous generations. You have this huge bit right in the middle, and you've got sizable cup holders. Your wireless charger is integrated here, and interestingly, the pattern here in this cubbyhole follows that of the grille right in front. All in all, it feels more spacious, but also cozier and a bit homier even. Of course, some people will say that, okay, that looks a little too minimalist or a little too radical for my liking, but again, BMW is really trying to differentiate itself from the usual, from the conventional. Some people may like it, some may not, but you can't fault them for being bland, definitely. But the more important question now is, how is this all-new model? What we have here is likely to be the mass market model. So this is a 20i, or rather the 20, they've gotten rid of the i. And I have to say that, it does the daily drive quite well. So when it comes to ride and refinement, this all-new X3, well, it composes itself very well. It's exactly what you expect from any BMW X product. And at the same time, there's that hint of driving enjoyment you can get out of it. I mean, even when you're driving around town, you have the sense that the chassis is capable of doing a little bit extra from time to time. I have to remind you guys that this model comes equipped with adaptive suspension or active suspension, whatever you want to call it. And, ooh, a Bentley, pardon my ADHD. We put the car in its most normal setting, and for the most part, that's never going to be touched by its future owners. They only just start the car, drive off, and whatever the ride setting is for that day, that's what they take. And we did exactly the same for this one. And it's comfortable, it's smooth, it's not jarring or crashy. And what I reckon is the suspension right now is in its most lax setting. So there might be times we might catch it off guard from time to time, but right now, I'm intentionally running over manhole covers right now. And it's totally fine. And it's not just in suspension damping where this thing is doing great right now. It's also in refinement. Now, granted, the Philippine model might get the diesel engine, although I do hope we also get this one. Now, this is the 2-liter petrol engine. It's good for about 200 horsepower, 300 plus Newton meters of torque. Par for its course in its segment. Well, you're not going to get great 4-cylinder noises out of it, you have to admit. But 90% of people who buy X3s probably won't care anyway. What they do care about is it quiet, is it refined, and will it make me comfortable and more relaxed on a long drive, whether it's in traffic or on winding roads such as this. And this is what I mean about BMW's chassis dynamics and chassis controls. Yes, it's far from the days where the ethos was the ultimate driving machine, where you have to feel like you're driving at 10/10ths all the time to get enjoyment out of it. But this is a good balance. For the moms and dads who like a more engaging drive, they will have a bit of a preview of that. And at the same time, for the 90% of people who buy crossovers who just want something that brings them from point A to B that as fuss-free as possible, they're also going to enjoy this. And those coming from the previous generation X3 are going to be surprised at just how almost limousine-like this feels. I mean, yes, we've said this before, they feel like baby X5s, but it's none more obvious than in this one. Now, if this all-new X3 already feels this good, we can only imagine what the all-new X5 is going to be like. That sort of shows you the direction of where BMW is going. I mean, yes, the DNA is still there, and thankfully, but at the same time, it's a few clicks towards being a Mercedes. And the irony is, a couple of Mercedeses we've driven before are starting to feel firmer. And that's sort of an odd thing going on right now in the German car industry. Some of them are swapping personalities almost. Not for those who buy an X3 because they simply like it and not because of the way it drives or any of that. They'll be pleased to know that the steering is light, the ride is smooth and pliant, and it's generally easy to drive around. I mean, nobody takes one of these on a winding mountain pass on purpose. But at the same time, you start having this odd appreciation for it. Like, it does things so competently that you end up respecting it so much that when you get down from it, you say, hey, this is a damn good car. I would like to have one of these as a daily, because it's just so agreeable and it's so complete as a daily driver. That being said, the all-new X3 isn't perfect, but then again, no car is. I like the way it drives, I like the way it rides, it's a brilliant, brilliant all-rounder. However, it is a bit of a tech overload in here. And it's not just because we're used to Japanese cars, but I think, I've mentioned before in past BMW reviews that the Germans have practically declared war on buttons, and it's more evident here. I mean, for some form of buttons, you have to go down here, and they're not really buttons per se. These are haptic touch controls. And the tendency is, because, you can't feel any gaps between the buttons, or not much there, you kind of end up looking down in the center console instead of looking at what's ahead on the road. So that's a little bit on the dangerous side. I mean, sure, you can get used to it at some point, but let's say you're driving one of these for the first time, there is a bit of a learning curve. Now, thankfully, the iDrive is still as simple and easy to use. You still have your good old scroll wheel, and that way you could navigate through menus and submenus that much easier. At least the rest of the controls are easier to use. It's generally uncomplicated. It's just the moment you start interacting with the infotainment system is where it kind of goes like that with the all-new X3. But if you do get past that and you can accept it for what it is, this X3 in 20 guys, this, for me, probably is the perfect spec. I would probably go as far as not going for the M Sport version, which is what we have here right now. Just as regular as it gets. It's like, how do I say this without sounding off? I mean this genuinely as a compliment, guys. Is when I call this thing the German CRV. Because think about it. The CRV is a car or a crossover with no real vices. It drives well, it rides well. Not the most engaging, but you grow to respect it a lot. And there's so much in common with that with this X3. And it probably comes as no surprise then that among the German big three luxury crossovers, this is, well, it's constantly battling for the top spot. And that's how good it is. And truth be told, I see this as becoming the best-selling model in BMW Philippines' range again. So we've taken a good tour of the 20i. Sorry, the 20, because they've gotten rid of the i. But right now, you probably noticed it is a bit louder. And that's because we're in the top-of-the-line version, at least for now, the M50. So for fans of the performance crossover genre, you're probably curious how this one goes. Well, I can tell you that, as we go over this crest at 100 Ks, within the speed limit, by the way, it handles perfectly fine. You know, it again, what you expect from a BMW. It handles well, it feels dynamic, and it doesn't feel like it's gonna flop over the corners. I mean, even if BMW makes a tractor, you still expect it to be a dynamic driving experience of sorts, right? For the X3 M50, that's it nails it. Of course, there are gonna be some compromises. I mean, the guys from BMW did say that, hey, this is about as quick or faster than an E46 M3 around the Nürburgring. Cool fun fact, sure. But, you know, you ask yourself, which is going to be the more fun experience? I mean, lap times aren't everything. Let's say you really have to have like a tall vehicle, or let's say you're 6'6", 6'7", and you don't fit inside an M340i Touring. Well, this is a pretty good alternative to that. Obviously, I don't have problems with headroom because I'm about 5'3". I'm at the height of Yuki Tsunoda. But, you know, it's going to handle differently compared to, say, the M340i. But at the same time, if you're not doing 10/10ths, which you shouldn't do on the road anyway, you can have fun with this. Admittedly, you can still have fun with this. You have that 6-cylinder soundtrack. You have relatively flat cornering thanks to all the millions and millions of sensors that keep the suspension as level as possible. And in terms of ride comfort, your sciatica is not going to shatter because of it. I would be lying if I said it's not a good car. It is. But I will personally admit to myself that I am not the biggest fan of performance crossovers. But you know what? My opinion shouldn't sway you. If you like this sort of thing, and you're considering one of these things, then go for it, brothers. Because, you know, it doesn't feel floppy at all. Then there are some tall SUVs out there that, yeah, sure, they're just fast in a straight line, and then you're gonna slow down to like 40 kilometers per hour to make the corner because you're scared to, you know, go on two wheels. This one, absolutely no problem at all. You can almost drive it like a 3 Series Touring or any sedan or wagon for that matter. Now for the X3 range as a whole, what do we think? Well, of course, we're driving it in its home country, so of course it's going to make a good impression. This is where most of the development happened anyway. In terms of the product range, I would like to see the 30e land in the Philippines. Now, I know we didn't have the chance to drive that. We drove the 20 and we drove this one, the 50. But I think, given BMW Philippines' electrification measures, the 30e would be a perfect fit because you don't get the range anxiety of a pure EV, and I understand that, but you don't get the thirstiness from a 2-liter engine. And for some people, that's the best of both worlds. Yes, the compromise there is it weighs a lot because you have your batteries and you have, your drive system and electric motors, etc., etc. But if fuel efficiency is your main target and your main priority, I think the 30e would be a great addition to the Philippines. But for the petrol model, it's efficient enough. Having driven that same engine in a different body in the 520i, it's surprisingly efficient for a 2-liter turbo engine, thanks to it mainly being a mild hybrid system. So people shouldn't really fear it being a petrol engine. Yes, diesels are more popular back home, but maybe it's time we start moving on from that. There are more efficient ways to get great fuel economy aside from just going for the diesel. We're still stuck in Euro 4, guys. And again, the modern turbocharged petrol engine does a fine job of that, and more so hybrids and plug-in hybrids. I know I'm going to get some flack for that in the comment section. But if you want overall refinement, a petrol or plug-in hybrid is hard to beat. But going back to the X3, yeah, we can't wait for BMW Philippines to bring it over.